a lot of people like the King James Version of the Bible. I think it's a great literary artifact, but it is an awful translation of the Bible. And
it's an awful translation.
Yeah.
Why is it awful?
For a number of different reasons. Because they were using inferior manuscripts, because they were frequently being overly literal, and so they weren't. If they didn't have a clear understanding of what something meant in the source, they would frequently just render it literally, translate it as literal as they could, follow the same word order and everything like that. And sometimes it's just nonsensical. Like we have passages in the King James Version that are semantically meaningless because they just punted. They were like, just render it literally. And
right.
But an example of why it's also outdated. Nobody speaks the language. In fact, when they published the King James Version, nobody spoke the language of the King James Version, because it is a very conservative revision of the Bishop's Bible, which was a very conservative revision of earlier translations back to Tyndale's New Testament and his Pentateuch, and then Coverdale's translation of the rest of the Old Testament from almost a century before. Mm-hmm. And so the language is almost a century out of date on the day it was published. And now it's more than 400 years further out of date. But a good example is the Epistle of Jude in the New Testament, verse 22. It says, "Of some have compassion, making a difference." And I've seen sermons preached on this where people say, have compassion on people, it makes a difference in their lives. It has a positive impact. It has a positive influence. That's how we interpret making a difference. It has absolutely nothing at all to do with what the King James translators were trying to say, because in 1611, making a difference didn't mean have a positive impact or influence. It meant to distinguish one thing from another. So what they were trying to say was, of some have compassion, but be discerning. But exercise discernment regarding whom.
Right.
And that phrase, making a difference, didn't start to mean having a positive influence or impact until around the year 1900. Mm-hmm. So our experience of the language of the King James Version is different from the experiences of the translators. Mm-hmm. So, and there are a bunch of different ways that we misunderstand the King James Version. But even that's an example of how we can be far enough away from the source culture that we don't even need a translation. The same language that we are speaking, we're too far away from the source culture to understand it.
Right.
So when you're talking about a translation from one language to another, you know, it's
isn't it so funny that we can be so far in the future and still be arguing about what the hell they're talking about? It's kind of goofy. Yeah, well, and it's unfortunate because, you know, it still means life or death for some people, what the Bible says. I know.
Or what people think it says.
Yeah.
And
that's an interesting point you make. It's perplexing to me how people can be a scholar of the Bible and dedicate their lives, I mean, to go to school and to get a master's degree in studying the Bible. It's a science, right? Any endeavor you take, any sort of discipline that you dedicate your life or your education to, it's a science. You're trying to figure out the truth about something. Mm-hmm. And it seems to me so counterintuitive that you have all of these people who are Bible scholars, but they're also subscribing to the very belief of the thing that they're studying.
Yeah. That is one of the things that causes me an awful lot of heartache, is the fact that there are folks who ostensibly want to understand this as it was understood anciently, but conveniently it always seems to line up with what they want it to mean today.
Right.
And I think there's a degree to which that's inevitable, because we don't have the authors here with us today. We can't drill them for understanding. We can't say, what did you mean by this? Did you mean this or did you mean that? We can only try to reconstruct their perspectives and what we think they meant. And for a text that is authoritative, you know, this happens with the Constitution and other things as well. For the texts that are authoritative or thought to be inspired or anything like that, just intuitively, not even on purpose, just the way the human mind interprets language, we're going to be nudged in the direction of an interpretation that serves our interests or makes sense to us. And for a text like the Bible, which there's so much power and authority and values wrapped up in it, I think it's just so incumbent on people who do make it their life's work to study the Bible to distinguish what I want the Bible to mean from what I think, what they originally wanted it to mean. Because if it just conveniently always happens to be the exact same thing, there's a problem, and your math is wrong. It's because they lived in an entirely different world anciently. They don't magically hate all the same people and magically love all the same people and magically need all the same things.
Are you religious?
I am.
You're what sort of religion do you follow?
I'm an active member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. So I'm a Mormon.
Okay.
But and some people discover that and they're like, "You deceived me." Well, I've had a pinned video on the top of all of my social media accounts that introduces myself and says that, but also says I make a very concerted effort to ensure that my religious beliefs, my dogmas, don't influence my academic positions, and I'm very good at that. And I get accused all the time. People post comments on videos saying, your Mormon is showing, and and it's always wrong, because they're confusing something that like looks similar on the surface if you squint at it, but don't really understand either in any detail. My positions that I share on social media are just strictly scholarly and are not aligned with my religious beliefs.
Where are your biases?
My biases, the biggest one I have is something that I also state in my intro videos, is that all other things being equal, I'm going to give the benefit of the doubt to the less powerful group. So if it's between a privileged group and an underprivileged group, and it's a wash, it's a toss-up, it's 50-50, I'm going to side with the less powerful group. And I'm a specialist in the cognitive science of religion. That was part of my doctoral dissertation. And so I study why people believe what they believe, how they think about it, how they talk about it, why they talk about it the way they do. And so a lot of my work also includes commentary about this is why this is going on. This is why people are interpreting the Bible the way they are. These are the kind of the intuitive nudges that they're getting to that's leading them in the direction of interpreting it that way. And so a lot of people accuse me of trying to read minds. And it's like, no, I just read a lot of research about why people believe the way they do.